Welcome to 10-Minute Zuimonki. During a conversation on various topics, Dōgen said, "Those who practice the way should not worry about food or clothing. Small and distant from India as our country is, both in ancient times and today it has produced many who earned a good name through either the exoteric or the esoteric teachings, and whose fame has endured into later generations. It has also produced many devoted to poetry, music, literature, military arts, and other disciplines. Yet I have never heard of a single one of them being wealthy in food and clothing. They all gained their reputation because they endured poverty, forgot about everything else, and devoted themselves entirely to the path they had chosen. How then could one who practices the way, having left behind worldly concerns and abandoned the pursuit of fame and profit, expect to live in abundance? In the monasteries of Great Song China, although these are latter days, thousands devote themselves to the practice of the way. Some have come from distant provinces, leaving behind their native homes. Most of them live in poverty, yet not one laments his lack of possessions. Their only sorrow is that they have not yet realized the way. Some sit in the upper stories of the monastery, others below, but all direct their whole heart toward the way as though mourning the death of their own father and mother. I myself once met a monk from Shishensho who had come from far away. Apart from 2 or 3 sticks of ink, worth perhaps 200 or 300 yen, equivalent in this country to only 20 or 30 coins, he owned nothing at all. With that he bought the cheapest Chinese paper and made from it an outer robe, an underrobe, and a pair of short trousers. Whenever he sat down or stood up, one could hear the paper tearing. It was a pitiful sight, yet he paid it no mind and never complained. Someone once suggested that he return home, obtain proper robes and the things he needed, and then come back. Shaking his head, he replied, "My home is far away. It would be a shame to waste precious time on the journey and lose the opportunity to practice the way." Without complaining even about the cold, he devoted himself all the more earnestly to practice. That is why Great Song China produced so many outstanding practitioners. Today I would like to look at the passage in which Dōgen speaks about poverty, dedication, and what it means to truly value the way. The passage begins with a simple statement: those who practice the way should not worry about food or clothing. At first this sounds very similar to the previous section, but here Dōgen develops the point in a slightly different direction. He observes that throughout history there have been people who devoted themselves to poetry, music, scholarship, military arts, and other disciplines. Some became famous, some achieved great mastery. But, Dōgen says, no one ever became respected because they had plenty of food and fine clothing. People became accomplished because they devoted themselves wholeheartedly to what they loved. This is a remarkably simple observation. When we think about those who excel in any field, whether it is art, science, music, sports, or spiritual practice, we find the same pattern. The people who accomplish something meaningful are rarely those who wait for perfect circumstances. They are the people who continue despite imperfect circumstances. They continue despite inconvenience, despite discomfort, despite uncertainty. And this is exactly what Dōgen wants to point out to his practitioners. If a musician practices for hours every day, if a scholar spends years studying difficult texts, if an artist devotes their life to their craft, then why should someone practicing the Buddha way expect things to be easier? Why should we expect enlightenment to come without commitment? Dōgen then describes what he witnessed during his time in China. He says that many monks came from distant provinces to train in the monasteries. Most of them were poor, yet he never heard them complain about their poverty. What troubled them was not their lack of possessions. What troubled them was that they had not yet realized the way. That is a striking statement. Think about how often our minds become occupied with what we lack. We worry about money, we worry about comfort, we worry about our future, and we worry about our status. But Dōgen encountered people whose greatest concern was enlightenment itself. Their question was not, how can I improve my circumstances? The question was, how can I deepen my practice? Then Dōgen tells us a story. There was a monk who had come from a distant region. He was so poor that he could not afford proper clothing. He bought the cheapest paper he could find and made robes and trousers from it. Whenever the paper became wet, it would tear. Imagine how ridiculous that must have looked. Imagine how uncomfortable it must have been. Someone suggested that he return home, gather proper supplies, and then come back to continue his practice. That sounds perfectly reasonable. Most of us would probably give the same advice. But the monk refused. He said, "My home is far away. It would be a shame to waste precious time on the journey and lose the opportunity to practice the way." This response reveals something important. The monk understood that time is precious, not money, not possessions, not comfort, but time. Once a day has passed, it never returns. Once a year has passed, it never returns. And yet, we often spend our lives as though we have an endless supply of time. We postpone what matters. We tell ourselves that we will practice later, we will study later, we will devote ourselves to the Dharma later. But later has a way of becoming never. The monk's paper robes are not really the point of the story. The point is his priorities. He knew what mattered most to him. And because he knew what mattered most, everything else fell into place. This does not mean that we must imitate him literally. Dōgen is not asking us to wear paper clothing, nor is he asking us to deliberately seek hardship. The lesson is much simpler. We should honestly ask ourselves, what occupies the center of my life? What am I willing and what am I unwilling to sacrifice? What am I always putting first? And where does practice fit into that picture? Many people think that they need better conditions before they can practice. More money, more free time, a quieter house, a different job, a different stage of life. But Dōgen's example points in the opposite direction. Practice begins exactly where we are, with the life we have, with the body we have, and with the circumstances we have. The monks Dōgen admired were not waiting for ideal conditions. They were using the conditions already in front of them. And perhaps that is the most important lesson of this passage. The obstacle is often not our circumstances. The obstacle is our belief that we need different circumstances before we can begin. The monk in paper robes understood something that many of us forget. The opportunity to practice is already here. The question is whether we recognize its value. Thank you for listening. Until next time.